entering the Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by DraftKings BMW Championship, second leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs, the penultimate tournament of the PGA season. Final bets, one and done, the weather, and all the DraftKings picks, lineups, and ownership with Toe Tag and Tambo, Tyler Tamboline from ShipItNation.com. What is up, sir? This is a very interesting DraftKings format this week.
Yeah, they switch it back. We got those 5Ks back. We're down to 50 guys. Only 30 move on based on the standings. So we'll have to wait and see how it all shakes out. But it's also the last golf show that we're doing. And we didn't even get to do it in studio, Pat. So we're back here. We're going remote on this one, but still a good event. Big contest. I've got 2 in the mega this week, so I'm fully dialed in. The 44-44 is going on this week. I'd won 2 tickets into that. So last chance to try and become a golf millionaire maker winner for this season before we move on to next, and with NFL just around the corner.
You don't think that they're going to have a Ryder Cup $1 million offering?
Nah, I don't think so. It'll be 250K up top.
Nah.
Still solid. We can make it work.
I would much prefer to play Ryder Cup daily fantasy than play a 50-man shortened field, to be perfectly honest with you.
I like it, and there's some strategy to it too. We saw it at the President's Cup with the certain players that you're unsure of how much time they're actually going to get out there and all that. So we'll be there. We'll be looking forward to it. I'll have some stuff out for that one for sure.
What do you make of the strategy this week for DraftKings, even before we get into the bets or anything like that? Like first impressions, because we were just talking before I hit record on this. Paul's away, so I'm producing everything this week, hence why I'm at home in a more controllable atmosphere for myself. But is it going to be double stud, double loser, and then 2 guys in the middle?
It just feels like, again, everyone talks about late steam and ownership on certain players. I look at it from both angles, and I look at what's the late steam on the roster construction this week. And I think people have found themselves more comfortable just on ownership projections moving with going with a couple guys down low. Now, that doesn't mean you have to plug in Patrick Rogers and Seamus Power or Lee Hodges and Adam Schenk. Maybe that is a combo that you'll see, but I'm saying it definitely feels like people want 4 guys, 8K and above. And that's an easier way to do it that I'm seeing people building with, especially if they're trying to get one of those top guys in, like a Cantlay or above. So it feels like Stars and Scrubs heavy, even though balance kind of worked last week. And if you think about this one, Pat, even though it's a no-cut shortened field, brought this up a couple times this week, I kind of want to get your take to flip it back to you, this is not the same scoring environment, or at least we wouldn't expect it to be. Maybe easier than 2020 when they were here, but maybe not. They also watered the greens that year heavily over the weekend. So who knows? But all I'm saying is position placement points can become very important. And if you need 6 guys to get those and not just the guys that score in that weaker range, you could end up seeing balance become a better strategy here.
Maybe. And I think that would harken back to last week where we built a lineup on the show last week that I threw into the 25, and it had a real chance, except for it had Seb Straka on it, who was dead last, I think, but it was like Rory and Glover and Poston, and it was essentially the recent form lineup, which ended up turning out really well outside of Straka coming in, but just his placement points and doing nothing and it was more pronounced last week, being dead last in a birdie fest, that you just had no chance of actually competing for any of the top prizes. Even small field stuff that I had it in, it couldn't get at the top by the time that Sunday came around. So you're going to need the winner, obviously, in a 50-man field. You'll probably need 3 guys inside the top 5, something like that. But you just can't have the guy at the back end of the field unless he somehow miraculously has 2 hole-in-ones or something like that.
Exactly what I'm saying. So we're on the same page, saying a little different, I think. But to your point, exactly. In this one, I just worry that because there may not be that scoring out there, you find it again. Par is usually a pretty good score here. You see it. I think it was Joe at Tour Picks did a show with him earlier this week. You've had him on in the past. He did a little chart and it showed hole 1 and 2. Forgiving. After that, good night to all your scoring, and just make par and move on and pick up what you can along the way. And if that's the case, like you said, if you got the guy at the back, it's just not going to work out very well if he doesn't have any scoring to go with it. And that's where you could see where if it's not Rory, Scotty, Rahm, you kind of then could have that balanced build where even if you start it with Hovland and go down, or Xander and go down, you do have a way just to avoid that range, or maybe only punt 1 instead of I'm starting to see people punting 2 spots down low to fit it even more.
I was just looking at sorted by difficult courses on Fantasy National. So, we assume, this is the assumption that I think that everyone is making this week, that it's going to play similar to 2020. And even if it plays a little bit easier, it's still going to be one of the harder courses that we've seen on tour this season, which I'm a big fan of. I want a difficult test as a part of the FedEx Cup playoffs. I don't want to see a minus 26 winner. A minus 5 winner would be just terrific this week. And maybe not a bad spot. Let's say nothing works out with the Honda Classic. I don't know if you can play golf in Florida. Tour-wise, in the middle of August, might be a bit too hot, but maybe move PGA National to one of the playoff events. It's something I would enjoy. Or move match play there. I just want more PGA National, more courses like Olympia Fields into the mix. But past 24 rounds, difficult courses, bogey avoidance. Because when you look at the scorecard, and I was on the same page as Joe when I did the research show, went through the scorecard, like you can get birdies early, 1, 2, and 4, I think are ones where you can realistically get birdies, but there's 7 holes on this course that I believe are right around 30% bogey or worse rate, but it's mainly bogey rate, not a lot of worse like you see at courses like Southwind, like we saw a week ago. So actual bogey avoidance is going to be key. Now, obviously, it's from different courses against different fields when they're weighted against what the field is doing in terms of a strokes gained average. But difficult courses, generally speaking, are the higher end field. So here are the top 10 past 24 rounds in terms of bogey avoidance per fantasynational.com. Jason Day is number 1. Tommy Fleetwood, Scotty Scheffler, Wyndham Clark, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Spieth, Hatton, Cantlay, Xander, Matsuyama, Harman, Hadwin, Victor, Rory, Henley, and then Ben An. Do any of those names surprise you, or would actually just like, hey, I wasn't thinking about that guy? Like Hadwin, I think is the biggest one on that list. You're like, really? Hadwin.
Yeah, Hadwin, you got me on there. And then one that stood out that I guess I haven't heard much talk about at all this week is Matthew Fitzpatrick, because he's 8,000. And, that's a different price point than most people are going to this week. Like a lot of people are either in that 9K and above, or they're very comfortable dropping down to some of the guys. I know you like Benny this week at 7,500. Like you've got some guys down there that I think people are just more comfortable with. And realistically, Fitzpatrick is probably a better player than all these guys. It's just, what have you done for me lately? And you're now bringing up, well, he's at least avoided bogeys for you lately. So that stands out. And the rest, pretty standard. Hadwin was by far the biggest standout when you mentioned him there.
Looking back to past 12 rounds, just to see if anything changes, Fitz actually moves to number 1 over the past 12 rounds. Fitz, Hideki, Fleetwood, Windy C, Spieth, Straka. Really wouldn't have guess last week wasn't a hard enough course to account for these standings. Ben An, Rory, Cantlay, Glover, Hadwin again, Scheffler, Henley, Hatton, Rahm, Jason Day. So Day's performance, he goes from 1 to 16 once you shrink down that sample size. So if you use the rolling report on Fantasy National, you can find some of these guys. But I just want to throw that out there, talk a little bit of strategy. You can always check the time codes for all of this stuff before we get into the bets, because I only have 4 this week. And here are the bets. Ready for this?
Yep.
Xander Schauffele, 20 to 1. Keegan Bradley, 60 to 1 with 5 places. Ben An, 66 to 1 with 5 places. Adam Svensson, 125 to 1 with 5 places. Just the numbers love Adam Svensson. And who am I to disagree with the numbers? I usually go with my gut and I lose. So I might as well go with the numbers on this one.
Yeah, I got to look at Svensson. Again, I like him. I've always liked him. Everything that's going on with him. The tee to green game has been very strong over the last 4. Solid around the greens, good on approach. Yeah. Definitely stands out. He's one that I wasn't as high on my list, even just using Fantasy National. I go a little bit longer term. I know you were looking at like 24 rounds, but he still does look good on my side. And at 6,200 when we get to DraftKings, but at 125, like that number. I had 3 only this week, and they're different than you. I got Hideki at 30. I got Finau at 40. And I did pick up the very, very early Monday morning text from my friend Ryan Baroff, Cameron Young at 50 to 1 before it dropped like a rock. So took that for the numbers. Still don't feel great about it because this guy doesn't win, or at least we haven't seen it. He's got wins in the past, but we've seen him come very close. So maybe in a 50-man field, he can find his way around off the tee and get to the top of the leaderboard.
Just for everyone out there, since no one is betting him this week, obviously Tommy Fleetwood is going to win.
Did you see my tweet?
No.
I said that's exactly. I said, like, here's the obvious thing. I parlayed. Again, it's a fun bet, but I put Fleetwood with Europe. And I said, you got to get ahead of the headlines. Here's the obvious. No one's betting Fleetwood for once. They all just bet him last week. He's going to win, albeit a 50-man field. So people will make fun of him that he got his first win, even though it was in a playoff event with 50 of the best. And then the reason you take Europe is because JT will miss a short putt and everyone will say Lucas Glover would have made that when Lucas gets overlooked, because that's all the talk this week of Glover being guaranteed to be on the Ryder Cup team. And if they don't take him, they're crazy and all these other factors. So I say you just parlay those two things together. You'll be all set.
I mean, that makes a lot of logical sense. Did you get any pushbacks? Like, well, I know one person betting Tommy Fleetwood, so you are wrong.
Yes, I had pasted them back the 50-person thread where one person had Tommy Fleetwood on their card. I think it's like golf betting tips, and he did like a thread of every card in the industry, and it was like one person had Tommy Fleetwood. Otherwise, he would have been excluded altogether. And it's all a number thing, right? People go, oh, Tommy doesn't win, and now he's down to 22. That's just stupid. We'll talk about him when we get there, but man, every single thing you could probably want for this course, he pops up at. He's been in the mix almost every tournament, the last 7 tournaments, and it would just make sense, Pat. That would be the time that he does it. A 50-man field. Oh, well, he got his first win, but it was only a 50-man field. Of course. Who cares?
Maybe I went with Xander over Tommy. Maybe I should just cash that out and go with Tommy.
I kind of like Xander. I liked him more last week. The argument about him is obviously his finishes haven't been very top heavy these last few weeks, but we are still in a no cut. I know some people are looking at just US Open history in general and like to compare to a hard course, tough, off the tee, everything you need, complete game. I mean, Xander would set up well for that. And I also think when we get to the DFS side of things, I think it's going to be close, at least in ownership, him and Hovland. Hovland did look better around the greens last week if you watch some of those shots down the stretch, but I don't know. I think I would still side with Xander there long term. So it's up to you, but I do like the Xander bet at 20.
Well, I don't want to reveal because I'm not playing very many lineups this week. I'm just playing basically like one in higher stakes and kind of across the board. And then we'll build some on the show and I'll play those in the $5.50, whatever it might be. But my team starts Xander Hovland.
Okay. Yeah, that's another interesting way to go about it. I was looking at going back to the Cali guys and go to Cantlay and Xander that people played last week and worked out quite nicely. But of course, they both got a little bit of a price bump there. So I like that start that you went with, just double down on those two and then drop down from there.
Yeah, the hardest part for me in that lineup was trying to figure out who I wanted in like the 8K range, because that's what I ended up being left with. Now I could rejig the lineup, but I think I had the people in it that I wanted. And then I was like, man, who in the $8,000 range do I really like? And it's like, is it Jason Day? Is it Tom Kim? Maybe the answer is Matthew Fitzpatrick and just leave money on the table.
Yeah, the one thing is funny, I haven't talked about him all week at all. And when you just brought it up, just going back and looking at it, using Fantasy National, going even on my longer term stuff, not only did he pop in the bogey avoidance, it's the around the green, the scrambling. We know he's gotten better off the tee and longer, if you will, because there's talks of this week with the rain coming in, last time's leaderboard being all bombers. Like, it does at least make some sense. But then, you had Brendan Todd, you had Brian Harmon, you had other guys up that board. So really, if you can put it in the fairway, you're just as good. But the point is, I think it's like one of the lower fairway rates here. It's like less than, I think it's around 40%, 40 to 45%. So obviously when that happens, people just side with the distance anyway, for good reason.
So I went back to try to, I think I talked about it on the research show. I can't remember now when it came down to the stats and some of those outlier names that you see up there, because you have like, Munoz, for example, was T8. Like you wouldn't really peg him as a bomber. Fitz was T6 here last time around as well. And obviously if you're using US Open stuff, he just won the US Open last year. So maybe not a bad look, but even like Brendan Todd and Munoz really stick out as the two non-bomber outliers inside the top 10. Munoz gained 5.2 strokes around the green, so he was just chipping in all week, and Todd gained 7 strokes putting. So yeah, you can be a shorter, accurate hitter and contend, but you need to have some weird outlier happen for you on or around the green just to come inside the top 10. Everyone else, I mean, even Hideki didn't play great. He gained over 6 strokes around the green, so he just kept chipping in the entire time. So like I'm not as big on Hideki this week, although it looked like he put something together when he needed it the most in the final round at Southwind. But looking back at what he's been doing in the past 3 months, he has great rounds and he has really bad rounds. There's been really no consistency with him. But I wanted to hit on Xander for a second. And the reason that I ended up coming around to him, because if people watch the show with me and Jeff, then, Xander wasn't really on my radar. So I went to go look. I need someone who can really drive the ball well this week, long and straight. And there's only so many guys on tour that can actually do that. So I start looking through Xander's off the tee numbers, and they're really, really good. Outside of 3 times this year, are they really, really good? And he lost over 3 strokes off the tee in each of those 3 events. Do you want to know what those 3 events were?
I do, because the only one I know is last week.
Okay, so you have TPC Southwind. What would you say is the defining characteristic of Southwind off the tee?
Yeah, the water that you're going to have to deal with too. So
yeah. So the other 2 places, do you want to take a guess at what the other 2 are then?
Did he play Honda?
He did not play Honda.
What about the Players?
Yes, the Players is one of them.
Okay.
Bay Hill.
Okay. Okay. So
if there's a lot of water around, especially in your sight line off the tee, don't ever play Xander Schauffele because he's going to hit it into the water. There is water at this course, but it's not ubiquitous like we see at those courses. It's not really a part of your sight line when you're coming off the tee. It's not just everywhere scattered around the ground. So I would expect him to have a full rebound back to what he normally does off the tee. Like that's one thing, like putting, at least, listen, I could be wrong, but if I'm trying to apply a little bit of context, if you have lost strokes off the tee 3 times, he's lost, well, 4 times all year. He lost marginally at the Travelers, like whatever. But like if you've lost a lot in 3 separate instances all year, and there's a defining characteristic that are all the same of those 3 courses, and this course doesn't have it, I would expect him to be closer to what he normally does, which is like 3.5, 4 positive strokes off the tee.
Yeah, I would agree. And also, like friend, I guess last week, because his buddy Cantlay certainly found the water as well in a time that mattered most. But either way, that is pretty interesting because it is, I just went and double checked it now, just those events, every other event, just so good. That's the thing, Pat. Like, again, most people look at him and what do you see his ownership coming in at? Because where I struggle, I know it's going to be pretty balanced across the board throughout there, but people just keep talking about Hovland. But are they just going to pivot last second and bump a bunch over to Xander where they kind of just even out? Or do you think there will actually be a strong enough delta between like Cantlay Hovland getting some, Fleetwood Morikawa getting some, and then Xander gets left in the middle because he's 10-1 and his results lately on paper, people are just looking up at his actual finishes, have not been the greatest, right? So what's your thoughts on that?
I don't have a very good feel for ownership in these sorts of events. Like even last week, I didn't have a really good feel for ownership. And frankly, I know it's probably more strategic to figure that out this week, but I also think that projecting it is much harder this week. So I think you still have to kind of go with your convictions. I do think that Xander will be less than Hovland. I think that Spieth will probably be less than Xander, but I really do think that a lot of people are going to be trying to jam in one of Rory, Scotty, Rahm, and Cantlay, presumably with one of those other guys as well. Like you're going to see a lot of lineups that have 2 of those 4 players in them. And then you're going to see a lot of lineups that are one of those guys with either Hovland the most as the next guy in, then Xander, then Spieth, then, well, not even Hovland, Xander, then Spieth, but more than Xander and Spieth. I think you'll see the second man in be either Tommy or Morikawa or even Homa over Xander at that point, just because of the cost savings and what it allows you to do either in the middle or at the bottom end, just makes it a bit more palatable. Because if you really do want to crunch it and go like Rahm Xander as your start, well, then you're going to be left down in like the lower 6s anyway, or the $5,000 range to make your next pick. Like, why would you even use Xander at that point? Just use Cantlay or something like that. It's not that big of a difference.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then I think, like I was saying earlier too, like in your build, you mentioned just not giving, I don't know your build, but I'm saying when you said starting with Hovland and Xander and left it at that, you can actually go like Hovland, Xander, a low 9K, like a Hatton, or even a high 8K, like a Connors, get another 8K or mid 7K, and then you just got to take 2 punts. And that's why I said I'm seeing the boost down low where people are just saying, who cares? What's the difference between playing a guy in that small 7K range of just 10 guys when you can just go to a Shank Hodges or an Eric Cole Shank or something like that, and you just feel comfortable about that and be able to fit 4 solid guys in above. And then the decision just really comes down to your point of who's that guy in the 8K range that I pick. I think that's where there's an opportunity because the 8K range, I'm seeing pretty balanced ownership of 8 to 13, 14%. And maybe Henley is the guy that gets like 15. That's what I'm seeing right now.
Well, who should I pick to fill out my team? I have $8,800 left for one spot. And I could rejig it around, but I like what I'm doing at the bottom and the way that I've constructed everything. And I mean, if you saw my betting sheet, I think you know who the final 3 guys are to go along with it. And it doesn't need to be Hovland. Like I could drop Hovland and get up to Connors if I wanted to. Like I could go Xander Spieth or Xander Fleetwood to start and then get back into that lower $9,000 range, which would give me access to maybe Hatton. Like Sung Jae Fowler.
If you can get Hatton, I'm getting Hatton in there. Hatton.
Yeah, but I would have to drop Hovland down to someone else to get Hatton.
Oh, okay. If you have 8,800 though, don't we just like, we could talk about this. Obviously a horrendous week last week, but people loved him, by the way. We were talking all week. We talked about the late steam that Wyndham Clark was going to receive. People were thinking they were getting him at like 10 or 12%. That just, we knew that wasn't happening. He got steamed all the way up, was horrible. But now you go back here, Pat, we just talked about it. How about this year's US Open champion that can bang it off the tee? And then you go look at the long-term on him. I got him across on Fantasy National, top 10 in bogey avoidance, total strokes gained, putting, driving distance, obviously right outside the top 10 in approach, right outside the top 10 in scrambling and around the green. He looks great. at 8,800. I don't think he's going to be low owned because all these metrics fit for him. But at 8,800, it's a pretty fair price, I think, in a 50-man field for the U.S. Open champion this season that's already on the Ryder Cup team.
Do we worry that he peaked at the U.S. Open? He just really hasn't been all that good since? Like,
Not
it was
really.
such a life-changing moment for him. He just hasn't recaptured that again. Because we see that happen with a lot of guys.
It's just tough, man. It's golf. Like, man, it's I guess
Sergio sucked
right,
for 4 years after winning the Masters.
Yeah, like the thing is, though, this is what people, again, he won the Wells Fargo, which was before that. So, yes, the U.S. Open could be the peak of hitting the high note with the 5th, the 6th, the first, and getting there with some of the other good results. But then you know how close a 25th at a Scottish Open and a 33rd at the Open can be from another top 10, or it could be a top 60, you could say, too. But I'm saying he played good enough at those events, top 30 at the Travelers. Like, it's just, who knows? Last week, very bad week for him. And I don't know if you can go back and check your trends. I was just trying to think about that, but he was fine off the tee at the Players, very bad off the tee at the Arnold Palmer. His second worst result was at the API. So maybe it's something about the Xander effect that you brought up there, just going back and looking at it. And who knows? But in general, I think that's still an interesting guy to go to this week in that range, unless you just want to play Cameron Young and go with that route.
Yeah,
Sam
I don't want to play Cameron Young. I think I would rather play Tom Kim. Or Day.
Yeah.
Like, just no one's going to play Day. I might as well just take a shot.
Yeah, Day pops for me. He's another guy. You just speak the same stats about. I have the same stuff up, so I'm just comparing them. You brought him up in your shorter term bogey avoidance stuff, but obviously we know he pops in that. Thing about Day, when he's missing a putt and everyone's pissed off, it's like, yeah, that was for birdie though, or that was for eagle, and he had a chance. This now he's tapping in for something else. Pars are good and they play here, but around the green, solid, scrambling, solid, top 20 in driving distance off the tee and top just outside the top 20 on tee to green in general over the last 50 rounds on some of this stuff. And he's sitting there at 8,600. Like, that's a fair price. Good putter. We know that. I'm fine with Jason Day as well at 8,600 here. Again, this range I just think is a good range to get to. And when we build, Pat, I think that's what I'm saying is where I think you could pick your guy up top and pepper in some of these guys. Even if you start with Hatton, you could still get Hatton and a couple 8Ks, and you have a different build than everyone that's skipping the 9s and dropping to the punts down low.
Well, the other thing that I could do with this lineup is I could take Hovland out and put in Fitz, because every case that I just made against Wyndham Clark in terms of, like, did he peak when he won the U.S. Open, I mean, Day has that weird outlier second at the Open Championship. Since he won at Byron Nelson, he went from being the most consistent bet to be a top 20 on the PGA Tour to guy who sucks.
Yeah, it's pretty true. But again, he's actually the guy that might be the one that peaked because he got his win. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Thing. But it's so if you're doing this, you're like Xander Fitzpatrick, you still have almost $8,000 left to spend.
Yeah, it gets me back up to 11-1 if I just take out Hovland and put in Fitz in that, like, spot where the 8K guy used to be. So I can get up to Cantlay if I wanted to. I'm $100 short of Rahm, unfortunately.
Do you have a preference there? Again, the price difference says it's massive, but like, if you had to pick one of Cantlay or Rahm, do you have a choice?
Yeah, I think Rahm would be my favorite guy in this field.
Yeah. One thing I'm noting on him, again, it's not a big deal because the ownership spread is not enough to talk about, but just to mention it, I think at the start of the week, people thought Scotty Scheffler was going to be the one to get squeezed because you either go up to Rory or you just take last time's winner here, Jon Rahm, who also has some US Open moxie and all this stuff you can look at. But in general, it actually looks like, because people still love Scotty, it's Rory, Scotty, and Cantlay, with Rahm being a little bit squeezed in the middle there. Just of note, I thought that was kind of interesting.
I mean, I can just keep Hovland in this lineup too. Like,
okay.
I don't care about leaving $700 on the table.
Definitely not this week. I mean, you can leave that easily here. It's the difference. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the $700 is Rahm Cantlay right there. The $700 doesn't mean Rahm's better play than Cantlay. That's just the number on DraftKings.com. It's like, you got to just pick your guy in that spot. And that's where, to show you how much you can leave on the table, make that decision anywhere. If you think Fitzpatrick is as good as Hovland, I mean, you can leave all that money on the table if you really thought that was the case. I don't think many do think that, but just to making a case, that's how I look at it, like what I can leave versus just having to go and upgrade somebody else.
Let's talk about the one and done. It's the final one. If we don't get a winner, we are out of the money. Even if we do get a winner, we might still be out of the money at this point. But we most definitely need the winner. We've used every good player outside of Tommy Fleetwood.
Tommy.
So
Tommy, lad, we have to believe it's the week, man. What's his percentage available?
25%.
Perfect. See, everyone's off. You can't use them. Like he's going to get played in DFS. But like I said, the reason people aren't betting is because of the number. That's you and I have been doing this a long time. You longer than me, Pat. That is how it works. We've seen this time and time again. I can't bet Russell Henley at 22-1 at the Shell Houston Open. Okay, don't bet him. Guess who wins the tournament? Russell Henley at 22-1. You paid all the money in, but you didn't bet him when the win happened. So that's the way it goes. That's Tommy this week. I like the pick.
Worth noting, fantasygolfchampionships.com for the one and done. There is a new one and done that is available up now for the swing season. They're a very, very small contest. The race for the Mayo Cup will return in January as the $125 contest with $50K up top. But if you just want something to do during the swing season, fantasy golf degenerates, you guys are going to be talking about these tournaments as the swing season goes along. I might even be doing a swing season show as well. There's a $100 one. There's a $50 one. 56-person tournament. If one fills, another one's going to start, but there's $5,000 in the $100 one in terms of total prizes. So it's not huge or anything like that. But if you want something to keep your interest for the swing season one and done only, just to pay attention to golf as it goes along, I recommend it. Fangolfchamps.com, fantasygolfchampionships.com. You should probably get an email pretty soon. And guess what? I think I might be doing an NFL Survivor pool for everyone.
Oh yeah. Perfect. I love Survivor. I think it's the greatest. And last year was an absolute disaster. So hopefully it doesn't turn out like that. But I think many people were done like 3 weeks in last season. But I like the carnage, Pat. I love playing it. I'm excited for NFL. And that's just another way you can get involved.
Yeah. So I suppose I should tell the people, if you missed Tambo and I, don't worry. We'll be back very soon with strategy for DraftKings NFL. We'll be doing that show. We'll be doing content every single week on the Pat Mayo Experience with all that. And you guys have a ton of stuff going on at Ship It Nation as well. Maybe even partnered with Run the Sims too.
Yes, we're working on some stuff. We've got some partnerships coming out. Pat's trying to leak all the secrets, but that's okay. We'll make it happen. It's going to be a good season over there. And speaking of the strategy stuff you just mentioned, Hoop and myself recorded a 4-hour NFL DFS process course, fully segmented to the topics people want to know: live finals, showdown, roster construction, creating your own process. And that comes free with any membership you sign up for right now. All the prices are still on sale. There's a bundle we brought that will go away after the first week kicks off. So check it out. Do the plug now, Pat, shipitnation.com, and we can move on.
Yeah, runthesims.com, code Mayo gets you 10% off everything at Run the Sims. And it's just all tools. There's no content that goes along with it. So hopefully we have some partners that will be able to provide context and content along with myself and Justin to go around with it. But if you just want the tools, then boom, you can go customize them and run 10,000 simulations in under 5 seconds. It's pretty easy. And
maybe
to do.
More. Maybe you could do more stuff. Speaking of, now that you little secrets you're leaking, we'll find out. We'll keep that one under wraps. But Run the Sims doing some really cool stuff right now. Definitely excited for that. Love you and Justin. So excited for what's to come. We'll see.
Yeah, pay it to follow at Justin Freeman 18 on Twitter, because he might have some news breaking about a simulation tool coming very, very soon. If that is something that interests you for NFL. Did you take a look at the weather?
I did. It is actually interesting. Like, I don't know. So 2 things interesting, I'll say, if you've got it up. I mean, there's literally an Olympia Fields tower, so you can get pretty damn close to where you're going here. And it is looking windy and rainy for Thursday. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it's like you're looking at, 16 mile per hour up to 17 mile per hour sustained. Crazy gusts in the early morning. Looks like 39, 31, 28, 20 throughout the day. Heavy rain leading up until about 2 o'clock. Friday has absolutely nothing. But the second piece that I was going to say is interesting, is I actually didn't realize this, Pat, is, until yesterday afternoon after we did our show, just kind of looking it up, the tee times they're going out in 2s, and they're actually really separated. Like 8:30 or 9:30 in the morning. I'm not sure which is local, but I think it's 8:30 Eastern.
Yeah, I think it's Chicago Central Time, isn't it?
Right. Sorry, I was just going on what I think the time they're going out is, right? I thought it was 8:30 Eastern that I saw, but either way.
I believe it's 8:30 Central Time, so it'd be 9:30. JT Post and Brennan Todd on the first tee.
Go. That is what it is. And so anyway, 9:26 a.m. versus Harris English and Rogers go off at 2 o'clock. And so, well, that's just 2 guys. But I mean, after 12 o'clock is what? 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 26 guys. Half the field's going off 3.5 hours later, basically, or sorry, 2.5 hours later after the start time of 9:30. So interesting that you maybe could find a bit of an angle there if you wanted to hover around some groups. Look, you can go for any angle in something like this, Pat. It's 50-man field. Some will leave, but some will just cap at 49.8 and build their lineups that way. Others will say, okay, I'm not going to do any double stud builds, if those are going to become more popular. Some will fade 10K and above. There's a lot of different ways you can build this week, but one of them I would say would definitely be looking at this weather and seeing if you could try and find an angle in for just like a set of maybe 10 guys and build some lineups around whatever you think could work out. The challenge is, Pat, going back to it, could be like a player's situation that year because there's all that rain in the morning and it's heavy. What if it does get pushed a little bit or anything? So I have to keep an eye on it till the very last minute.
Yeah, and the wind gust that you were talking about, the like up to 45 mile per hour, that's all right now as we're looking at it before they get on the course.
Yeah, it slows down after that. There's rain that comes around, it looks like 10 a.m. local. And then 2 o'clock, it looks like it rains heavy again. So I don't know how it will actually play out or look, but I don't have a problem with it on a 50-man field where you're trying to look at any angle to be able to get unique in these tournaments to get a shot to get up to the top.
And Friday looks like the greatest day ever to play golf.
Yes, it really does. And Saturday wasn't that bad either. I think when you look at the longer fork, again, we're getting way too into it, but like Saturday was just fine as well. A little bit more wind than Friday, but Friday does look perfect.
All right, let's talk DraftKings then. What do you think, if we just try to straight up build lineups, what do you think is going to be the most popular build this week?
Man, it's so tough. I think it's
Rory.
Rory or Cantlay is what I'm looking at now. If you're starting with one of those guys, so it looks like a punt is involved no matter what. Like I'm seeing even Kirk getting some late love. I'm seeing Patrick Rogers get some late love. Lee Hodges for sure.
I'm seeing this Kirk stuff too. I didn't quite get it. I mean, I get it because I looked up his numbers, but I was just surprised that people started gravitating. Yeah, like I'm seeing Shank, Hodges, Shank, Kirk, Hodges and Shank way above everyone else, then Kirk, and then it's like Cole and Svensson.
Yeah, like if you go Hodges, Shank, who are the guys that you would think like 8K to 10K? Like who's it going to be? Like
Hodges, Shank with Rory in it?
Well, I just think we land where we land at the end. I'm trying to figure out up the middle. What's that look like? Like I'm only really seeing Henley,
Ben Ann,
82. I guess Hatton at 9K.
Ben Ann.
Oh, Ben Ann. Yes, let's put Ben Ann in this. Definitely, he's the guy for sure.
I'm seeing him and Cameron Davis right around the same. So if you did those two, Rory, Ben Ann, Shank with Hodges, and then Cam Davis, you have $10,000 to get Spieth, Morikawa, or Fleetwood. If you could find the extra $100, you could get to Xander.
Yeah, I think we see people skip this ugly range though and go to like it looks like it's Hatton. Because even if you go Hatton, you still have enough money to get Hovland, Cantlay. There you go. So you can go Cantlay, Hovland, Hatton, Ben Ann, Shank, Hodges. And you don't have to play any of those ugly 8K guys where, like you said, there's so many question marks. Nobody knows what to do. You get Hovland, who people like, and then you can mess around with this. But I'm saying like Hatton looks underpriced at 9K. On Fantasy National, Hatton rates out like top 5 in some of the main categories across the board. Like he's just so solid, and he's been good, Pat, in all these. Like he was good in all those tournaments. When he went to the RBC Canadian Open, I remember us talking about it, saying this is like the first weak field he's played in, and sure enough, he puts that 8 under on Sunday and tries to get into the mix, but too little, too late. So I don't know. I just think this build looks popular, but if you go off Hovland, Cantlay here and go to Rory, you can still get Wyndham Clark, Tom Kim, or Jason Day, or anybody like that. What else are you seeing with this build?
I mean, now that we've built it out, it does seem a little bit like, I don't want to say that's going to be, I just don't think a lot of people will do that, to be perfectly honest with you.
So then I think, just to say it, who do you pick between Shank and Hodges?
I mean, neither. I'd play Svensson.
No, we're doing what the public does, because I think I have the second version of this is what you're about to say, is it's pick one. Hodges. So let's go Hodges.
Yeah.
You won. And then I think it's what you said, where then it becomes the Ben Ann, Cam Davis, and you still have 9,500 to play with. So even if you went up to Rory, you've got a 7K guy and a 9K guy. You've got 2 8K guys. You can do whatever you want at that point. How else do you see it playing out if people aren't doing that?
I just think that you're going to see maybe Cantlay is the answer to this, and playing Cantlay with Vic. If that ends up working, then fine. But I do think that you're going to see one of Rory, Scheffler, Rahm in between those three. I mean, between the 4, I guess maybe since we had Cantlay in, that would work. But Rory, Scheffler, Rahm all together, I would say that they lead a lineup. Not even saying they're playing together, but they lead a lineup over 50% of the time, and probably like 60, 70% of the time this week.
So then that still requires a choice, because even if you plug in Rory with just Ben and Davis as our starting point to say, okay, that's what it is, that's why the punts still get popular, because who are the other 3 7K guys that people are going to use if they're not using a punt? So, or who is the punt that they use? It's probably Schenk.
I'm looking at the 7. So it's Cam Davis, Ben and Griot, along with Keegan Bradley. And then Schenk at 65 is just sucking up a lot of the oxygen there.
That's why I'm saying it almost has to be Schenk.
Okay.
Because even if I pull Griot and just say, okay, McIlroy and Davis, Schenk, I've got 8,000 to play with. And then it becomes your choice of Griot and 8,700 like Tom Kim, or it can become like, I don't know, people like what Justin Rose did last week, and that gets you to Henley, like Rose Henley. Do you think that would be popular? They're getting some ownership.
I personally don't think that Rose is going to be popular, so that's me.
Yeah, pick your poison. I guess that's where maybe, okay, so I'll save that one. Take Rose out. Leave Henley's definitely the popular 8K guy. So you take Rory down to Cantlay, and now you can get Max Homa in there. Or you can take Rahm with Wyndham Clark.
I got the lineup for you.
What do you got?
Rory and Cantlay together. Schenk and Kirk with Ann and Griot. $0 left over. That's what people are doing.
But it's funny because you just said no one's playing Lee Hodges and Schenk, but it's Kirk and Schenk. It's the same thing. People are playing these double stud lineups. That's what we're learning.
I mean, I didn't say that no one is playing Hodges. You just asked me to pick between them, and I picked Hodges.
No. You didn't say the. I'm not calling out the player. You didn't say. I'm saying you said you just the way you were saying we were building it. You felt like people weren't building it that way, but then we're here again. People are building.
You're right. I can see that you were right about that. That now that I've gone through and building, like I wasn't trying to build these type of lineups.
Right.
But I do think that people will try to build these type of lineups.
I think because your original point is very correct that Rory, Scheffler, Rahm, Cantlay is taking up a massive point. Not saying with 2 of them, but at least starting. But what became clear from doing this exercise is that whoever you choose up top, people are still able to get them in with Hovland, Xander, Morikawa, Fleetwood, whoever it is. So that to me looks like, how do we build against that? Like if you go Cantlay, Fleetwood, it's still people building, like you said, you can get into that mid-range. Like, I don't know. It feels like definitely that's what people are doing. Like would you rather go Cantlay, Rory, Kirk, or go Cantlay, Hovland, Hatton? Cantlay, Rory, Kirk.
Cantlay, Hovland, Hatton. Like that's a 3v3, or 2v2 with Rory and Kirk and Hovland and Hatton.
Yeah, I would probably take the Hovland Hatton. That's where I'm saying I think that's what could come into play here and be something that makes a difference for people, especially if we suspect it to get harder as the weekend goes on. Like I know it may be the first day is tough and then it technically gets easier by the scoring because the scoring average goes down. So I don't want to say, the factual, that's the truth, but I'm saying like it bakes out some, the greens are faster. Like again, if the cream rises to the top, are Schenk and Cole and Kirk and Hodges and these guys, are they going to penalize you because they're that anchor to you? And then you still have to get 5 other guys right plus them. What if you get one more wrong? You're dead. Now you only have 4 guys. So unless you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think you're in trouble because then you don't have the balanced portion of it where you could have the winner, 3 guys in the top 10, and then a guy in the top 20 and a guy 24th, and that'll still make it up because of the position placement points.
You know who I like at $6,700, and I do want to work him in. And I might actually rejig my main lineup now that I've really thought about it. Denny's the play, right? No one is using Denny.
Yeah.
And we just talked about the outlier players that we saw inside the top 10 last time around. What did they do? They either chipped and putted the lights out. That was their path. That's Denny's path.
And also, why do you again, no cut? Why would someone feel like, again, you're putting volatility in with Denny, but like you said, who could have the outlier? I think there was 3 guys coming into this today, Pat, that I was going to mention. And I'm glad you brought him up. He was one of them. The other 2 were Thigala and Siwoo, because they're like a 68 or a 78, and you're like either or. But they can also chip their way back into it and find their way around, like chip away at the scoring. So I think you brought up Denny. I was going to bring up those 2. I wouldn't necessarily jam them all in together because there's a high likelihood one of them is the outlier. But I do like the Denny call for that reason. And what happens if you go like Denny, Benny, Griot, Davis, you now have 10-3. You can go back to Xander and Cantlay, and it actually projects the same, but you do not have Shank, Hodges, or Kirk. And while you're still using those 7K guys, you have no 8K, you have no 9K, and you have no 11K and above. You fade the 3 at the top. I think that's an interesting lineup, Pat.
Let's see. If I throw Svensson into this, what do I end up with? I think I land on Griot. No, and on Straka. You know what? Or I can play Keegan. You can go like Hovland, Cantlay, Denny, Hatton, Svensson, Keegan, if you wanted to. But let's say I don't love Cantlay. I like Xander instead, and I save myself that money. That means I have $600 left with that. I could get up to Homa if I wanted to. I'm $100 away from Fleetwood in that build, or I can bring Keegan up to Poston, Siwoo, or Ben-An, or I could bring Svensson up to 68, which would give me like Putnam or Todd, who I don't have a ton of interest in those guys.
Yeah. What about I guess I'm looking at one here that I was just thinking out loud for you. Like you bet Xander, you can get like what would you think of a build like this? Because you like some of these other guys, like Xander, so your starting point, you get 2 guys right behind them, where I don't think many go with this type of build setup where it's 3 starting from 10-1. You go Xander, Morikawa, Fleetwood, then it leads you to Benny, Ann, McCarthy, and Svensson. So you still have the double punt lineup, but you don't have anyone above Xander, and you fit in 2 more 9K guys.
So I think I'd rather have Hatton than Morikawa for one thing.
Save us some money there.
And you save a ton of money. So let's say Xander, Fleetwood, Hatton is the way I can go. And you can, I mean, I wouldn't have that big of a problem using Spieth this week either, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he's sort of an outlier. Like the reason that I don't like Morikawa, I think on paper, it does really work out well for him. You can see how well Morikawa's results have translated to being good on paper so far. But if this is going to be a little bit wetter and distance is really going to make a huge impact, you're only looking for so many outs with Morikawa. Is it going to be the one time a year he outputts everyone? Probably not. So at least when you're talking about like Denny at the bottom, that he has that out. He chips and he putts. Morikawa doesn't do either of those things. He drives the ball accurately, but he's not super long off the tee, which basically means he needs to have like a 95th to 100th percentile iron week in order to truly contend. At least that's the way that I'm mapping it out in my mind. Whereas Hatton hits the ball a little bit longer. He's been better off the tee. He can chip and putt. That can be an out for him. I feel like at this course in particular, Morikawa is really boxed into a corner with how many outs that he has. Like he's not drawing to a flush draw. He's drawing to an inside straight draw.
And at almost $10,000.
Yes.
Which matters. I mean, that's part of it as well when you got the other guys around him, like you said. So again, he can have an outlier iron week because he's Colin Morikawa. It could happen. But it's like you said, when you have these other options around him, and just using the Fleetwood example, yeah, probably a little bit more owned to or similar. But honestly, Morikawa has been getting a little bit of love lately that we've seen. I have him somewhere in the 12 to 15 range, even if he is on the lower side of that, like 13. It is what it is. Like you can play him or don't. I'm just saying I like the points you just made. So like a Xander, Hatton, Fleetwood could still be at least a double punt build, but you could also mess around with it and say, okay, Denny, Benny, and just 7,000 flat, right? Like you'd end up with 7,000. You'd be making your pick between Thigala or Hadwin. You kind of liked Hadwin earlier. What do you think of that?
I mean, I don't love Hadwin. It's just I was surprised to see the numbers come up on him. I probably actually want to play Thigala, but although Hadwin's played well at U.S. Opens in the past, so I could see it. Or you could go Xander, Fleetwood, Hatton, Fitz, double punt, Denny, and Svensson.
Can you get that? Yeah.
Yeah. It has 300 bucks.
8,000 in there. I kind of like that too, because then you are skipping the entire 7K range. You actually you can get Shank in there, but you like Svensson. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good bit. Again, that's a thing. So in this type of build, even if I go Shank there, it's just so unique. You're still double punting with including one of them being Shank, but not many are playing McCarthy. Barely anybody's playing Fitzpatrick. And how many people that are starting with Xander are also getting Hatton and Fleetwood in there? And you have nobody in the 7K range and nobody 10-3 and above. So none of the most popular guys up there in Rory, Rahm, Scheffler, Cantlay, Hovland. So yeah, I think that's another way to do it this week. And that's actually much lower owned and only a couple points on projection that we're sacrificing with a unique roster construction and lower ownership, both product and overall. So yeah, definitely looks pretty solid from that point.
All right. So I think that that's the type of lineup that I want to go with. Like I said, I'm not spamming the board or playing 150 this week, kind of phasing myself out of golf a little bit, give myself a little bit of breather before the NFL starts. Although, thanks to your help and the help of Run the Sims, I actually made a lot of money during NFL DFS last year. So did you, but I didn't make as much as you. But it was
great. It was a great season, but it's definitely part of it. The showdown stuff, especially on Run the Sims, incredible. And then just in general, being able to get back into these bigger fields, the live finals, all that stuff. I love NFL season. It's my favorite, even though I do a ton of golf content, and that's kind of, what people will know me from. I certainly do love NFL DFS. It's by far my favorite across the board.
Well, you got to King of the Beach and the World Championships last year.
Yeah, looking to back that up again this year. So hopefully we'll see how it goes, but definitely good little run. 6th at King of the Beach last year. Couldn't add to the trophy collection behind, but still, excited about that tournament. And now this year they have King of the Desert as well, Pat, which we should get to that one. That's in Arizona, the sports book right there. The DK is going to have up and running. So get their guy, Pat Mayo, down there, and we'll get down to that one. That should be a fun one for the Super Bowl weekend is when that is.
Ooh. So is there a football? It's a showdown football one to go along with the golf one?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like the top 300 in both football, I think it's like 150 in golf and 150 in NFL goes down to the top 30, top 15 in football, top 15 in golf. Go down there, and I'm assuming play in some sort of mixed contest, or maybe it's just NFL showdown. I didn't dig into the rules enough yet. I got a ticket so far. I got one. So for the golf side, so we'll see how it all shakes out. But it's very top heavy, but it's more for the experience. That's going to be awesome. The DK Sportsbook during Super Bowl weekend. So pretty sure I'm going to be down there regardless, but hopefully it's with a King of the Desert ticket in hand at the live final portion of that event.
Yeah, I have a meeting later on today to see if they'll send me, Jeff, and Cuss to go do our show live from Phoenix that week. So yeah, it'd be very easy since you're going to be there. You can just come on the show.
Yeah, definitely tell them I'm going to be there either way. But that's a separate topic. But yeah, you should tell them that for sure, and they should do it because it's going to be a good week. They're having tons of people down there already for that event.
All right. Anything else you want to add golf wise? I think I'm a BMW'd out. I'm actually looking. Unlike last week, I am looking forward to watching this tournament.
Okay. I'm looking for the one build I was looking to round it out was just that I didn't know we were going to end it just yet, but just in general. Might have found it here, but it's just I can't quite finish it out. It was like if I started with Fleetwood and Hatton, skip the 10K range altogether. It almost seems like that's why the 6K guys and below just become so popular because you just almost still need one. Like even if you like your Ann Griot Davis, I guess that gets you up to 8,600. Our guy Jason Day, it's not the worst, but yeah, I can't really find that version of the build I like. So that's kind of the difference where I think people just end up abandoning the balanced build. So that'd be my final takeaway for this week. But definitely excited for the NFL season upcoming with you, with everybody, with everything that's going on at ShipItNation.com. The tidbits ended today at Toe Tag and Tambo. So for golf, they're done. They'll be back for week 1 of the NFL. That's all I got, Pat. Appreciate everybody watching and supporting all season long. Excited. And thank you to you, as always, for having me on here with you.
Sure. We'll be back for football. We'll be back for golf when the season starts. It's not like Tambo and I are not covering golf as the swing season goes along, but I just want to get my feet wet into football full time before we start going bonkers with more golf. We will blow out the Ryder Cup, and Jeff and I will be back next week to talk Tour Championship bets anyway. So there's only so much golf content that people need in their lives at this point. I've seen the numbers. They're going down. It's just like week 17 of football. They're not going to match, week 2 and week 3. The Tour Championship is not going to match the Masters. It's just not going to happen. People are kind of over it at this point. But hey, hopefully we can win some money. The money's all the same. The odds are all the same. We can still win doing this, and hopefully this is the week to dig me out of the hole for the year, because that would be fantastic news. Anyway, smash the like and sub to the channel while you're here. Be on the lookout for more fantasy football, betting NFL, and overall NFL coverage over on Mayo Media Network and on the podcast. Ton of that stuff out already. You can play in the Week 1 Listeners League. That is down in the description. Let's get that filled as soon as possible. Okay? I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!